So, dear colleagues, welcome to the fifth section of the 2023 SITL workshop series. This is the last section for the year, and we are glad to have you with us. I'm Feng Wei, and I'm honored to serve as the moderator for this section. And today we will have three presentations. The issues includes PETE and social justice and equality in physical education. And each presentation will be 20 minutes, followed with 5 minutes discussion. So moving on to the first presentation of the day, Dr. Curtner-Smith and two of his doctoral students will talk about pre-service teachers' use of the spectrum during the pandemic. So time is yours, Dr. Curtner-Smith.
Thank you very much. And good morning, evening, or afternoon, or middle of the night, wherever you are. Thanks for coming along. I should start by saying the study isn't me with two grad students. It's really the other way around, especially Jake. It's Jake with help from myself and Meghan. So I'm just giving the presentation. So Jake's done the majority of this stuff. So we're going to talk about a couple of beginning teachers' use of teaching styles during the pandemic. You may think that, well, okay, that's behind us, but we think there are some lessons to be learned from this particular study for what's going on now. So some background. Firstly, it seems that regardless of the content area that new teachers teach, novice teachers teach, they struggle. They find life very stressful. Here in the US, added stress these days from right-wing politicians putting pressure on them, low pay, school shootings, things like that. And then in physical education, you've got the subject marginalization as well. So all of that seems to lead to large numbers of people leaving the field within 5 years. In fact, close to 50% of American teachers leaving teaching within 5 years. So in our part of the world, the pandemic really hit in March 2020, and that obviously exacerbated the kind of stress that teachers are under, especially for PE teachers. So school closures obviously had a huge impact, teaching remotely, and then all the measures that came along trying to combat the pandemic. So masks, vaccinations, testing, and various other measures. And then you had continuously shifting sets of rules and regulations about what one could do during the pandemic. And that led to a sort of trial and error pedagogy once teachers went back to schools. So from our reading and from common sense as well, it seemed that the key issues during the pandemic, or the bulk of it, people keep talking about as if it's completely over, when obviously it isn't. Anyway, the main issues were what could be taught online when teachers had to teach remotely. And then when they went back to school, how could they conduct classes safely? And then how could they manage a blended approach when they were partly teaching online and partly teaching on campus? How could they modify their existing pedagogies, the ones that they used already? And then could they develop new ones specifically for that situation? Those seem to be the key issues to us. So the purposes of the study that we conducted were to describe two beginning teachers' perspectives and practices regarding their use of teaching styles during the pandemic. And then if you know me, you'll know I can't stay away from socialization. So we were interested as well in the socialization that influenced those perspectives and practices. So this is part of a larger study. We're just giving you the teaching styles results today, but we looked at lots of different things as well. But we're going to focus on teaching styles for this presentation. So as I suggested, the theoretical framework was occupational socialization. And specifically, we were interested in how the teacher's professional socialization, that's the impact of their undergraduate PETE, and their secondary professional socialization, that's the impact of, in this case, their master's degree, how that aided them in dealing with the conditions of the pandemic. And then we were also interested in the degree to which the teacher's professional socialization was helped and hindered by their acculturation. So that's the cultural influences that had affected them prior to their PEAT. And then lastly, obviously, how they were affected by their organizational socialization. That's the culture and conditions in the schools in which they were working. So we had 2 participants in the study. They were both men and they were both 25. And they completed their undergraduate PEAT and a master's degree in sport pedagogy at the same American institution. So the first one, and this is a pseudonym obviously, was Jason. He was in his first year of teaching in a northeastern state. So importantly, that was a blue state. So for those of you not familiar with the American colors, that means it was relatively politically liberal. He taught in a suburban elementary school to kids aged 6 to 8 years, and there were 300 of them. His class sizes were great, 12 to 15 students. He had decent facilities and equipment, and he also coached basketball at a local high school. Then the second participant was Lane. He was in his second year of teaching in the southern United States. So that was a red state, so politically and socially conservative, so sort of different kettle of fish. He taught in a rural middle school, which catered to 500 working class kids aged 10 to 13 years. His classes were larger, between 30 and 50 students. He had reasonable facilities, and he also coached baseball at a middle school and American football at a local high school. So a little bit about their undergraduate PEAT in terms of the spectrum. So the program they were in saw the spectrum as a foundational set of pedagogies together with the behaviors from effectiveness research, if you're familiar with those. So together, those 2 things form the foundation of their methods courses. Layered on top of that was what people have come to call models-based PEAT. So in this case, pre-service teachers learn to use the multi-activity model. So that's the traditional way of teaching sports and games, sport education, TGFU, health-related fitness, TPSR, and then the skill themes approach to use with the youngest kids. So specifically, in terms of learning the spectrum, the way it was taught began with a classroom session in which the theory was explained, and as were the various teaching styles. Then the teaching styles were modeled by a professor teaching the students through the styles. That progressed into peer teaching, where the students taught the styles to themselves with professorial feedback. And then the key thing is, throughout the program after that, the styles and the clusters were linked to models in classes and field experiences. And then the master's program that Jason and Lane were in, little different to many master's programs outside of the US, in that it was a campus-based coursework program as opposed to just by research. So it took 2 years, and they also had a culminating field experience where they taught in schools. And part of the program involved them helping with and teaching pre-service teachers in the program they'd already completed. So that they were helping with methods courses. In Lane's case, he taught a methods course. So they were also teaching students to use the spectrum themselves. And then another key part of the program was that they did more in-depth study of the models and the styles linked to them. So we collected data, or Jake collected data, for 3 semesters from September 2020 to December 2021. We started off with a formal interview in which we asked both teachers to describe their ideal program without the pandemic and the ideal practices of PE, what they do if they had their choice. And we also asked them about the impact of the pandemic to that point. And that was followed the next month by another formal interview in which we asked them to describe their acculturation, professional socialization, secondary professional socialization, and their organizational socialization to that point. And then the meat of the data collection were large numbers of informal interviews by phone and email right throughout the data collection period, where Jake was constantly in touch with the 2 teachers, figuring out what was going on with them, how they were doing. And then he also collected large numbers of documents, so lesson plans, unit plans, that kind of thing. And they wrote in a weekly reflection journal as well. So anything that they thought was salient about working in the pandemic. And then we did sort of standard interpretive analysis and reducing the data to themes, but we did it by question. So in terms of teaching style use, here are some of the key findings. Firstly, and we need to tell you that Jason taught a blended program to begin with from September to December 2020. So that means he was teaching some of his children at the school, and then in the evenings he was doing online stuff with other children, and then they would reverse that program the next day. So the kids that had been online went to school, and the kids that had been at school were online. So it was a long day for him. And then from January to December 2021, all of the children were back at the school. So pre-pandemic, and ideally, Jason espoused using a range of teaching styles from both clusters. That's what he thought good teachers did. And specifically, the models he was interested in using were the multi-activity models, and he talked about using both direct and indirect styles, mostly the practice style. He was a big proponent of sport education and talked about a shift from using direct to then indirect styles as the seasons progressed. He was interested in TPSR, which uses mainly the production cluster styles. The health-related fitness model, again, using a range of direct and indirect styles. And then the skill themes approach with his youngest kids, and that's mainly the production styles cluster again. These are some of Jason's thoughts during the pandemic. Firstly, early on, just to get an insight into his thinking, he pointed out that his main priority was both pedagogical and physical survival. And it's hard to appreciate that now. I was thinking about this myself because I felt the same way, and I was safely tucked at home teaching from a screen, and he was in the front line. And the physical survival part is pretty salient, I think. So realizing educational goals was secondary for Jason. But he carried on, he fought the good fights, but he stopped using the sport education and TPSR models because he thought using the indirect teaching styles was just too difficult and dangerous in that situation. And then he modified the skill themes approach and the multi-activity and health-related fitness models by switching to using direct styles only. So all of the production cluster went. He just had to use direct styles. So pretty severe modification. And he said early on that using direct styles was for the best because it helped him maintain control over the students. That was key. When he spoke about his online teaching, he just described it as brutal, mainly because he was disconnected for the students. But he tried various things with differing degrees of success. So, for example, he sent links to YouTube videos so students could practice by themselves. So that was a sort of modified self-check style. He asked students to share ideas about how to safely participate in physical activity. So that was a sort of divergent form of teaching. And then he asked students to demonstrate skills live. So he tried practice style teaching, and that was a disaster, he said, and a terrible idea. So working with kids age 6 online must have been horrendous. So this is Lane. Remember, Lane was in the deep south. So he taught on campus the whole time, no school closures. Pre-pandemic, his ideal teaching was very similar to Jason's. Again, he favored using the multi-activity model, a good version of it, using a range of teaching styles. He was interested in sport education, and again, that shift from direct to indirect styles, and TGFU, using mainly production cluster styles, and then a range of direct and indirect styles in the health-related fitness model. So that was his ideal program. During the pandemic, Lane actually thought he was lucky because he didn't have to teach online, which was interesting, pre-vaccine as well. And he employed the same models that he'd used prior to the pandemic. But again, just like Jason, he changed things so that he only used direct styles. He stopped using anything indirect at all. And that was mainly to restrict students' movement and choice so as to keep them safe. And just to give you a sort of flavor of what he was doing, with his sport education, he had a team role as a sanitizer, whose job it was to clean all the equipment as they were going along, which is, I laugh at it now, and I did at the time, but, it's a pretty scary thing to have to do. And apparently the kids embraced it. So looking at the second part of the study, what shaped these teachers' responses to the pandemic? Well, firstly, their acculturation prior to Pete didn't seem to have anything to do with it. So it didn't have anything to do with forming their interest in using a range of teaching styles. So their apprenticeships of observation, their own schooling and their own coaching when they were kids seemed to be mediocre at best. And their own teachers and coaches mainly used the practice styles. So they weren't modeling any different styles prior to their exposure in Pete. Their professional socialization, so that's the influence of Pete, seemed to be considerable. So both of them entered Pete with moderate coaching orientation. So they were more interested in coaching extracurricular sport, but open to the idea of teaching. But they left Pete with moderate teaching orientations. So it looked as if the Pete program had a fairly significant influence on them, what they thought about teaching and how important it was to them. And that included their use of teaching styles. And one thing that Jake impressed on me when we were talking about the presentation the other day was to stress that during their Pete, both the teachers said they learned how to use the teaching styles. So it was a sort of mechanical, technical situation at that point. So they learned how to use the teaching styles in their undergraduate Pete. Well, then their secondary professional socialization, so that means the impact of their master's program, that appeared to strengthen their teaching orientations, and they became more skilled pedagogically in terms of teaching the different models and using the teaching styles linked to them. And the key here is that they seem to learn why to use teaching styles. So it wasn't just a mechanical thing, there was more thinking behind it. And it appeared to us that one of the factors in shifting from a technical, mechanical way of looking at the teaching styles to thinking about why to use them was actually teaching the pre-service teachers themselves the spectrum. So that was a big part of it. Now, the organizational socialization, the school's conditions obviously had a big impact on their teaching style use. So firstly, for both teachers, the cultures of the schools were largely positive. There was a sort of, we're all in this together culture formed by other teachers and their principals or head teachers. And they had a lot of control as to how they adapted during the pandemic. So they weren't told what to do. They had a lot of control themselves, including their patterns of teaching style use. There were some differences between the two. So up north in his liberal blue state, Jason and his colleagues were very concerned about the pandemic. Hence, there were more drastic shifts in teaching style use there. Whereas down here in the deep south, in the conservative red part of the country, Lane and his colleagues seemed much less worried. It was more of an annoyance. And so his shifts in teaching styles were less drastic. So here are some of the conditions that led to the shifts in teaching style use. And some of these are more direct and some of them more indirect. So masking and what they called the mask police. So that was administrators and other teachers constantly checking on them that kids were wearing masks. Social distancing, having to keep the kids apart, obviously had a huge impact on what they could do. Having to keep equipment clean. Then what they talked about or called the revolving student and teacher absences. So they never saw the same kids twice during the same week with all the sickness going around. And there were lots of teacher absences as well. And then later on, the lack of substitute teachers. So if they got sick themselves, there wasn't anyone to replace them. So that had an impact. The school district administrators in both states were largely hopeless. It was more about propaganda and focusing on optics, according to both teachers, and they weren't pragmatically very helpful. And then lastly, the politics of the pandemic. So they were caught in between people arguing about vaccines and masks and whether kids should be in school or out of school. And all of that obviously had a wearing effect on the teachers. So to summarize, pre-pandemic, both teachers were interested in using a range of teaching styles within several curriculum models. Their use of teaching styles was strongly influenced by their PEAT and their master's program. And then during the pandemic, they were forced to modify their pedagogy and employ mainly direct teaching styles. The key takeaway, we think, is some good news. So out of this carnage that was the pandemic, the most important thing we think is that both these teachers coped with and adapted to the pandemic, and they created something out of nothing in a sense. And a key reason for that appeared to be their professional and secondary professional socialization. So their undergraduate PEAT and their master's program. And that's contrary to most of the socialization research, which shows that teacher education doesn't make that much difference. And so, we were not just pleasantly surprised, we were ecstatic to see that the program worked. People outside, maybe even outside of the US, may not see that as a big deal, but we do. We see lots of our teachers leaving who we don't seem to have much impact on, and they just revert to teaching the way they were taught themselves as soon as they enter schools. The fact that these two fought the good fight, we think pretty important. I'm going to leave the last word to Jason, just to give you an insight into his thinking. This is what he said in May of 2021 at the end of his first year of teaching. It's been a hell of a year, I can tell you that. Thanks for listening.
Thank you for your presentation. So, questions and comments from the audience? Actually, I got one very quick question. May I ask, why do you choose the two beginning teachers? Yeah, because their situation seems very different during the pandemic. Yeah, that's very interesting.
Right. So, firstly, we were interested in the politics of it, or at least I was probably more interested in the politics than Jake or Meghan. But having one in a blue state, people in the United States treated the pandemic very differently depending on where you were politically. So I was interested in that. Part of it was convenience as well. So all three of us, we knew and know these two lads pretty well. So obviously we're not allowed to tell you which program they came from, but we knew them very well, and we knew what they'd done, and we knew a lot about them. So we thought they would be forthcoming and tell us all the nitty-gritty about what was going on during their teaching in that time. So obviously the other difficulty with doing research in that situation, to get people to talk to you when they're, in some cases that they're worried about their own health, and to get strangers to talk to you is, so, hats off to them. I mean, they spent a long time talking with Jake. Marvelous, really, under those circumstances, when they were, especially Jason, when he was dealing with, talking to little kids online in his living room with dodgy internet connection. So,
Yes. Thank
Matt,
you. Yes.
How representative do you think these two students were from, a program of 15 or 20 kids going through each year?
Yeah. Well, they were some of the best in the program. So I think they're representative of the best in the program. One of the things they also said was that having the master's degree made a big difference. So they said if they just left and been in that situation, having just done the undergraduate program, they may have crumbled and given up. But the fact that they've done the master's program, and I think the fact that they've worked with their undergrads as well, that made a big difference. Yeah. So they could see it from both sides. And part of it was their heart. They just didn't seem to have, they didn't have any give up in them. That's the impression I got.
Good, thank you.
Okay, thank you for your presentation. And I think we should move on to the second presentation. Today's second presentation will be delivered by Dr. Martins and Dr. Ribeiro. They will try to highlight pre-service teachers' use of the spectrum during their school placement. So Dr. Martins and Dr. Ribeiro, you can start when you are ready.
Dear colleagues, thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to be here. I would like to thank the invitation to the Spectrum board and for all the work they have done in the last couple of years. My name is Joao Martins. I am a university teacher at University of Lisbon in Portugal. I'm also a university supervisor of press service teachers, and this presentation is shared with my colleague, a brilliant physical education teacher, José Pedro Ribeiro, that works in a secondary school in Cacém, Escola Secundária Gama de Barros, and is also very experienced school host cooperating teacher. So he provides support and supervision to press service teachers. I think there are more than 70 press service teachers supported during the last 20 years. So today we are here to share with you some practical examples and reflections based on our experience on how press service physical education teachers integrate the use of the diverse teaching styles on their teaching practice, essentially during their school placement training. So just to be very brief and give you a little bit of background, the Faculty of Human Kinetics belongs to the University of Lisbon. It has about 83 years of history, around 3,000 students and 130 professors working currently at the Faculty of Human Kinetics. And the FMH has a long tradition and relation with the spectrum of teaching styles, mainly due to the work of two professors, first Professor Francisco Carreiro da Costa and also Professor Marcos Onof. As you can see on the left side of this slide, down, you see Muska Moston and Sarah Ashworth in 85 at Faculty of Human Kinetics and also with Francisco Carreiro da Costa. So it's a long tradition that we work and we teach the spectrum of teaching styles to our students. Essentially, in Portugal, to be a physical education teacher at the middle and secondary school level, the teacher needs to have an undergraduate or a bachelor that is 3 years and a master degree, which needs to last 2 years. So, and we approach the teaching styles in the bachelor, in the third year, in the second semester, in a curricular unit called Pedagogy of Sport and Physical Activity, and also in the master. Essentially, the master has 2 years. The first one has a lot of curricular units, and the second one, the press service teachers do the practicum, their training in real context, in school context. So there they can apply the diverse teaching styles. At the bachelor, what do we ask our teachers to do? Is their first contact with the teaching styles. So to be very brief, they work around 30 hours of contact with teaching styles and pedagogy. We ask them to select 2 different styles, one from the convergent group, other from the divergent group, or the reproduction group of styles or the production group of styles. They need to plan in small groups a 60-minute session where they need to use these 2 styles. So they need to define the goals of the session, the contents to be taught, and how to connect that with different styles. They implement the 60 minutes lesson to their colleagues. They, after that, do a report. And by the end of all the work, they have also a test about teaching styles and the pedagogy in general. For working with the students in the undergraduate, we use different sources. The book that you know, the spectrum of teaching styles is also very used. And we also develop several resources written in Portuguese in a direct language for them about teaching styles and how to implement that in classes. So regarding the master, we are going to provide you some examples. How do they learn in their second year during the school placement. Again, the school placement is in the second year of the master. We form about 70 to 80 pre-service teachers per year, every year, and they need to develop several competencies around four main areas. The main one is teaching. Each pre-service teacher is included in a small group of pre-service teachers, so each school could have 2 to 4 pre-service teachers working together, each teacher with his own class. So one area is the teaching, the other is to develop an action research. They also need to participate at the school, for example, for sport tournaments inside school, and the relationships that they need to establish with the community, with sport clubs around the school, the family, and all the community surrounding the school. So to make bridge between the school and the community. So each pre-service teacher has its own class. In Portugal, one class has around 20 from 30 students normally, and they work in middle and secondary school. They do all this work during 1 year and being supported by the university supervisor and the school host operating teachers. So it's essentially during the teaching, the area one, that they try and implement and learn how to use the teaching styles in real context. Now I'm giving the floor to José Pedro Ribeiro to continue the presentation.
Hello to everyone. Sorry about my bad English. I'm one of the school hosts and school supervisors that receives the students from the university. I give them one of my classes during the entire year. They give the classes to the students from day one until the last day of the classes. So for each of the 4 students that I have, I give them one of my classes. And during the year of school placements, we try to experiment as much as they can in everything, and also in teaching styles. We try to give them the practical knowledge about the advantages and difficulties. You try to teach them how to apply them, and you try to give them the knowledge how to adapt the different styles to different classes, different purposes, and teaching learning situations. The most traditional style, the command style, is very useful tool, especially in the beginning of the process. The students came with very insecure, and they want to command and they want to keep the control of the students. So the command style is very useful in the beginning of the process, especially when they are new learnings for the students, and in the beginning and the end of the session, to give the student teachers the feeling of command, the feeling of control of the class. So is a very useful style in the beginnings. We have then the most common style that we use in our classes. We split the practice style. We split the class in smaller working groups. We give them different tasks or different goals. We use this in 2 situations. With same level groups, give appropriate goals to different students, and or we can use different proficiency students in the same group. That's try to the most able of the students help the other ones. You use a lot of the practice style because it optimizes the space and optimizes the materials. We are working with 3-4 classes in the same space, so we don't have enough space. We are not very rich, so we don't have enough materials. So if we split the class in smaller groups, we can work different subjects of the physical education and optimizing our resources. We also use a lot of try to give the students autonomy and try to involve the students in their own process of learning. So use a lot of the self-check and the reciprocal styles, evaluation. We show the goals of the physical education for that year. We give the kids an evaluation of their current status and give them the conditions to work. We use the evaluation when we're comparing with a model. We give the kids a model. Usually now we give the model with a cell phone. They all bring cell phones to the class, so we put YouTube content or something like that, and they compare their execution with the model. We are trying to get to self-evaluation. We give them, as I said, we give them the goals and their current situation, and they're giving checklists to the kids to self-evaluate. And also, we are doing pair evaluation in small groups using the reciprocal style. And we give them the checklists, and the kids are trying to evaluate each other. Here we have a particular case. Guided discovery style is not a very common style to use in physical education. The student work on a task until we reach the goal. We give the precise goal to the students, help the student by providing useful materials, feedbacks, and information. You have here a particular case of teaching how to ride a bike. As in the rest of the world, here in Portugal, we are making a huge investment in green mobility. We are building bike lines, we are preparing everything to the green mobility. But in my school and in the other schools of the country, we noticed one thing. My students, we are about 13, 14 years old. Almost 30% of them don't know how to ride a bike. So we begin that process of give them the tools of how to ride the bike, because we are making a huge investment in bike lines, and the students don't come to the school by bike. They come to the school in public transportations or in cars. So we are making an effort to promote the use of bike. And the guided discovery style is particularly well fitted to the teaching of how to ride the bike, because we give the kids the tool. The tool is first a bicycle without pedals, so they can acquire the balance. And we give them some information, and they acquire the balance by their own. And then we give them a regular bike, and then there will be acquiring the propulsion in that bike. So they put balance plus propulsion, and they know how to ride the bike. But it's all by their own, because it's impossible for the teacher, when we have like 25 students doing physical education, it's impossible for the teacher to hold one kid at a time. We also use the divergent discovery style. Here, we give several possible goals to the students. It's the same as the convergent discovery style, but here there are several possible goals. In the other one, we have only one goal, like in the example, how to ride a bike. And here we give them several possible goals. As in the other style, we help him by providing the materials, the feedbacks, and the information about it. It's very common in collective games, and we use it a lot in dance and acrobatics. We give the students some orientation about the construction of choreographies and explore the movement. We give them time to do the task, and after the time, they present to the other kids of the class the task they have fulfilled. Here we have a particular case. We go through a pandemic, we go through going home with no live classes, only in computer classes, but something good came out of that. So we use a lot of cell phones in physical education now. We try to make the cell phone our ally. We try to use it in the physical education classes. The kids love it, and it's a very useful tool. In the command style, it provides pertinent visual models and demonstrations. We put some QR code for the kids to scan it. They watch the QR code, they see the video that was in it, and they perform the tasks. In the practice style is also the same thing. Visual models, demonstrations. It's possible to put the execution time in the cell phone also, and we use the cell phone to film some product. Like at the end of the session, we should provide the teacher to the email of the teacher with the filming of something, some gymnastics, some volleyball, something like that. Evaluation. In the evaluation styles, we use the cell phone for filming and comparing, for watching myself, watching the other, discussion with the others with the cell phone in front of them, with the film in front of them. That's give a more objective evaluation for us, for the teachers, because we can watch the movie quiet in our house and repeat it as much as we want to. So it's very good for give the kids the evaluation of the physical education, and it provides the kids want to look good in the picture, and they repeat a lot. So we observe that when you put the cell phones on the class and filming the kids are doing much more repetitions of the exercise. They are doing much more work, and they try to have a very good look in the picture. So they try and repeat a lot. So the cell phone is one of the things that we are using a lot in the last 3 to 4 years in the process. In conclusion, I try in my school, and we, the school hosts, are trying to give the student teachers that all styles are born equal and all styles are good. There are no better styles than the other one. The styles are appropriate to the different situations, different students, different materials, and all styles are good too. And they want to try it. They will fail, they will repeat, but try and fail and repeat. That's the essence of the whole process at school. As I said, different students, classes, contents, goals asks for different styles. Plan, implement, reflect. Plan, implement, reflect. That's all. That's the essence of our process. We plan with the student teachers. They implement in the class. After the class, we are getting a discussion with them about the result, and then they plan again with the improvements. Then they implement again. They will reflect again, all together in the group. Always with the support of the school hosts, and sometimes with the support of the university supervisor. We came about one time a month at the school. And the teaching styles are critical for the quality of physical education, and they are critical for the students learning how to be a teacher. Thank you. As we said in Portugal, obrigado.
Yes, thank you for your presentation. So, do anyone have questions and comments for them?
Yes, I do actually. I'm
Sure.
Natalia. I'm on the move, so that's why I'm not putting my camera on. So I'm Natalia from University of Alabama, and I've just wondered why you have chosen action research as your method for collection of the data.
I can pick this one, Jose. In the school placement, the future physical education teachers need to develop competencies, not only in teaching, but also in action research about a problem that can be related with their own teaching or a problem from the school. So in addition to the teaching and learning, the students need to develop some research action competencies to be able to identify a problem, to propose a solution, to understand that problem, and to propose modifications. So if you see, the school placement is designed more or less for the students intervening in different levels, like the whole school physical activity approach. So they need to be very, very good in teaching, but they also need to connect with all the school and all the community.
Yeah, I would completely agree. It's they intertwine completely. So thank you ever so much. Yes, thank you.
Just to add something to what João said, for instance, we know that 30% of our students don't know how to ride the bike, because that was in 2 years before. That was the work of the investigation of the previous student teachers. They made the diagnosis of our school of how it was the proficiency of the students in using a bike. And we know that data because we have action research.
Thank you ever so much. Thank you.
Other questions and comments?
Yes, I have a question.
Yes, please.
Hello, everyone. So congratulations, João and José. So great work. It was very nice to hear. So I'm from a University of Porto. So we have a similar training program. So I was wondering how you deal with the, for example, when your pre-service teachers arrive to your school placement. So in the beginning stages, for example, what is theirs and what is yours? I mean, so would they start implementing different teaching styles by their own initiative? Or, for example, the cooperating teacher just models in the first step and then progressively transfers this responsibility to pre-service teachers for taking more decision making on the planning, what teaching styles, the content. How does that work? Because I found that very difficult to manage. This scaffolding is very complex. So I would like to learn from your experience.
Claudia, that's a very good question. At the beginning, we try not to, we go step by step. So the students, when they arrive at the school, it's an all new world for them. So we don't go like to specific details of teaching styles or the specific feedback that they are using. So that we establish some priorities. The main priority in the beginning is to know the school, the spaces, to plan the initial classes, to control the class, so organization issues, instruction issues. So when the students, after 3 to 4 months from being in school, they are more confident in their own competencies, and they know much more better their students, and they feel more confident to try the different teaching styles. So I would say in the beginning of the process is not very conscious even in their planning to consider all the teaching styles. That's not easy, and that's not the main priority for us in the beginning. But after 3 to 4 months, we go into those details.
We try to put them in situations of command first, because they feel very comfortable with that, and they give them authority for the kids. They are in the control of the whole process. So we begin with the command style, and simultaneously practice style, because we don't have enough space and enough materials for that. But the command style is very comfortable for them at the beginning. Then we try to use it less and less during the process.
For example, looking at the collective games, sport games, situation when they are playing 3 against 3, it's close to divergent styles, to guided discovery or divergent discovery, but they don't do that in an intentional way. But afterwards, we go into those details with them. Look, you should stop and ask them questions to put students to think about the solution or the different solutions they have in this opportunity. But for example, for collective games. But I remember, for example, observing one class of José Pedro is a specialist now in dance, different from 20 years ago. But it was really good, for example, to see students building their own choreography, even in the beginning. So the students have time to interact, to socialize, and to build their own choreography. And they were using divergent styles, even if in the beginning that was not very conscious and intentionally. But afterwards, we introduce them to the students, recall them, and they start to do it in their planning. Yes, but essentially in the beginning, we try to focus on managing the class, the instruction, to give them confidence, and then we go to the details along the year.
Okay, so it's a very good discussion that part. I really want to continue our discussion, but due to our time limitation, I would ask everyone to go on to the third presentation. And our third presenter today is Dr. Haneishi. She will concentrate on justice, equality, and inclusion issues in physical education. Let's welcome her to start her spectrum presentation.
Thank you. Okay, I will share my screen. Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here. My name is Kanae Haneishi. I am the associate professor at Western Colorado University in the United States. First of all, I want to thank you for the Spectrum Board of the Spectrum Institute to actually extending this last webinar, because I really wanted to present, and then they're like, okay, we'll extend the last one. So thank you so much for the flexibility. And then everyone, thanks for your willingness to stay 30 more minutes to listen to my presentation here. Okay, so today I will be presenting on promoting justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion, we call JEDI, through applying diversified spectrum teaching style. Okay, so social justice movements and the advocacy for equity have increasingly given more attention in the literatures around the world, such as Black Lives Matter movement and the International Olympic Committee's new guideline for gender equality. Yet, we still witnessing discrimination against marginalized population based on their gender, race, language, age, religion, socioeconomic status, ethnicity, nationality, sexual orientation, to name a few. So the recently International Swimming Federation rule in regards to the transgender women athletes further an intensive debate around discrimination against transgender and intersex athletes. And the Russian invasion of Ukraine has shown the world a shocking scene of social injustice. In the US, hate crimes and mass shootings continue to dominate the news headline. In the school settings, cyberbullying, mental health, increasing in suicide attempts and deaths are concern for many educators and parents. So although the concept of social justice has a history of 40 years in physical education, scholars report that the physical education curriculum, many physical education curricula continues to be Eurocentric, elitist, and individualist, masculine, and the competitive focus, and the reproducing a culture of gender, racist, sexist, ableist, and practices oriented by privileged white able-bodied Christian males. So now more than ever, numerous researchers have demanded the meaningful changes for social justice in physical education. Additionally, the Lynch 2022 provided a comprehensive overview of social justice pedagogy in physical education and the youth sports through various lenses of social justice, such as healthism, fatism, ableism, and so on in the list here. Since the learning environment in physical education is often social, dynamic, and public, the social issues such as discrimination and inequity are often raised during physical education lessons. The Butler 2016 described that PE offers the opportunity to navigate challenging tasks through face-to-face negotiations and discussion, and in a context where it becomes difficult to smooth over or ignore such problems as inequity, unfairness, and injustice. So given this rich opportunity in physical education classes, physical education teachers can create a lesson where JEDI, which is Justice, Equity, Diversity, Inclusions, embedded into the student learning experience. In other words, the physical education teachers are the great position to play a unique role in the social justice movement as they address human dynamics and the complexity of a society during their lesson. And then moreover, in the United States, we are in process of developing the new physical education standard, and then standard has been proposed to drastically move into addressing SEL, or social justice, equity, diversity, inclusion in that area too. So in terms of aligning into our standard, that many physical education teachers are now in need for the pedagogy to address justice, equity, diversity in their lessons. So while the importance of intentionally embedded the concept of justice, equity, diversity, inclusion into physical education lessons has been addressed, many physical education teachers still lack of the knowledge of how actually they can implement into their daily lessons. They understand, yet it's important to address that Jedi into their lessons, but there are lack of resources for the physical education teachers to actually how to implement that in their everyday lessons. So a little bit about the concept and framework and theories. I'm not going to go touch too much on here today, but Heather Heckman's social justice education framework offers the 5 essential components of social justice, which is content masteries, tools for critical analysis, tools for social change, tools for personal reflection, and then the 5th one is multicultural group dynamics. Particularly in the relation to the last 2 components, Heckman's framework suggests addressing the power relationship with teachers and the students and foster critical reflections in relation to power, control, and authority in education. So that a key promise of spectrum teaching style is that the teaching is a chain of decision making. And a decision that can be made by the teacher and the learners. This is the key promise of spectrum. So that these decisions can be categorized as pre-impact decisions and impact decisions and post-impact decisions. So the deliberate teacher and the learner decision making specific to each spectrum style offers teachers and the student an opportunity to critically analyze and reflect on the content of that episode, such as movement skills and tactics, but also the power dynamics that exist between teachers and students, as well as among teachers. So having the teachers relinquish the decision-making power to the student offers that concrete way to think about empowering the students and infusing the Jedi in lesson episode. So additionally, the spectrum of teaching styles originated with the clear intention to address the full range of human development, which is called developmental channels. So including physical, social, emotional, cognitive, moral, ethical, sexuality, meaningfulness, technology, and financial. So that developmental channel represents the intrinsic universal path along in which we grow. Within each channel is an infinite array of human attributes that reflects our thinking and guide our behavior in each channel. So these universal pathways and their attribute in developmental channel apply to all people regardless of their culture, genders, religions, and ages, races, and languages, and so on and so on. The backgrounds. The attribute is all inclusive, which can be positive and negative, and it is the characteristic we choose to guide our thoughts and daily behavior. So when physical education class is deliberately diversified through various and non-versus teaching style of spectrum, the different attributes proposed by Mustons and Ashworth are triggered and fosters a learning environment where equity and social justice are central component of learning objectives. It is evident that using diversified spectrum teaching style can create a learning environment that promotes JDI in physical education. So the spectrum teaching style that fall within the reproduction cluster of styles are routinely embedded in traditional physical education lessons, as we all know. These include commands and practice, reciprocal and self-check, and inclusion styles. Within the 5 reproduction teaching styles, a significant amount of decision-making is shifted to the student to style C, D, and E. So for example, reciprocal style C promotes the recognition of individual differences. Style C promotes learning to accept that differences, and then also promotes critically analyze their peers when they're working with their peers, which is related to the Heckman's social justice education framework B, which is a tool for critical analysis. And then also style C promotes the working with peers who are different from you. and then also encourage to critically reflect the world that their peers living in. And the self-check style D is in order to recognize and then accept others who are different from you, the process has to start from you, the self. The process needs to start with addressing embedded identity that leads to self-awareness, self-identity, and then self-acceptance. The self-check style D promotes that, which also related to the Hecksman's social justice education framework D, tools for personal reflection. And then using the inclusion style E, teachers can not only promote the inclusivity, but also emphasize the equity in the episode. So while equality is to provide same support to everyone, but equality emphasizes on providing the support that individual needs so that everyone has access to success. So for example, when you are teaching basketball, the teacher can provide different hoops like this, or in addition to using the standard basketball hoop, they can create different hoops, size of hoops, or use different balls. So the student can pick stations or like balls or goals that they can be successful. So that promotes the equity. And then also similarly, when you're teaching rock climbing, teacher can provide something like this, that student can pick different paths so that they can be successful. If that rock climbing, the climbing on the wall is scary for that student, the rock climbing can start from that floor, right? Stuff like this. So these are some examples of the using the inclusion style E can promote not only the inclusion, but also equity, and then the diversity as well. So because the students have more opportunity for decision-making in production cluster of teaching styles, where even more decision-making power is shifted to learners, multiple opportunities exist to embed JDI into physical education teachers' daily lessons. For example, Guided Discovery F promotes asking questions to create opportunity for personal reflection and critical dialogue among students. For example, Joy Butler 2026 proposed that student inventing games using intentional series of questions. So that inventing games teaches gameplay such as skills and tactics, but also emphasizes on teaching democracy, preventing bullying, and promote social justice. Here are some example questions for critical reflections to address JDI. So for example, teacher can ask these questions to address JDI within the lesson. Did you include all the teammates in your team discussion? Or did you listen to everyone's idea? How did your group choose to process the decision making? What is the consensus building? So these are some of the questions that address the power dynamics within that student. So sometimes when you're teaching physical education, you all know, even though you say, discuss something within the team, then come up with some sort of decisions. Oftentimes that student with power, student with the popularity, they are the ones who dominate the discussions, and they come up with that decisions, that influences the decision making from that team. So addressing these questions helps students to reflect that, okay, did we listen to everyone? How did we come up with these decisions, right? And who took most powers making these decisions? And then who benefited and who did not? And then these questions, sometimes you can connect it with what's going on in our societies and policy makings. Sometimes in our societies, only a few people in that decision making make certain decisions that affect everyone, but might not be fair to everyone. So teacher can adjust these decision makings that affect everyone that might not be fair, that happening in the society, happening in the physical education. So teacher can connect that what's going on in that physical education also happening in the society. And the other question could be, how does this help people different abilities play together? Or how does this help us to engage with our opponent? Or can someone explain what team did? And so on and so on. So divergent discovery style H develops the emotional competence and the cognitive capacity to produce multiple solutions to the same question or to a same series of unfamiliar solutions that seek to expand the parameter of that content beyond the known and expected. It is engagement in that discovery of new content by producing multiple responses to an unfamiliar specific problem, questions, or solutions. So each student experiences that emotional cognitive process of ongoing beyond known information. So teacher encourages that production of responses, not any single solution. So through this style H, students are encouraged to recognize that their own perceptions might be different from others, even though on that same information they received. That might be because of their own unconscious bias or the stereotypes of certain groups that they have. Then teacher can further guide the critical dialogue among the students and address why certain student perspective is different and what are the barriers and the inequity exist in a society that influences those decisions. For example, here I'm going to give you a more practical decision, the examples. Just keep checking the time. Okay, for example, when students are playing flag tag games, a teacher introduced the basic rules but allows students to choose how they want to attach a flag to their body. Some may choose to hold the flag first and then attach a very short flag to their body. Or some may challenge themselves and leave the flag as long as possible out from their body. Some may decide to attach the flag on the side of the body, while others may attach on the back of their body. So after playing a few rounds of the flag tag games, the teacher can guide a student to a critical dialogue on Jedi. The first, teacher could embrace the difference. Different flag attachment ideas came from students and acknowledge the importance of diversity. And then teacher could lead the student to a discussion about equality versus equity. Some students might think that the links of the flag should be all the same, while others might propose different links based on their perceived ability in the game. In other words, the students who are more athletic and faster may choose to leave the flag alone. So through that dialogue, the teacher can address the importance of including everyone in the class, regardless of their ability. Furthermore, depending on how the conversation goes, the teacher can guide the student to reflect their own bias and the social injustice exists in our society. For example, if a student proposed to let girls have shorter flag than boys, the teacher can use the moment to have all students reflect whether all girls are less athletic than all boys. If the student finds more girls are less talented in sports, teacher can explain about the limited access to sports for girls, particularly for the minority girls. Through the divergent discovery style, teachers can not only address the importance of diversity and the diverse perspective, but also connect the diverse perspective from students with other Jedi components, such as inclusion and justice. The learner designed the individual program style I that provides that learners an opportunity to discover a process and the procedures that solve a broad issue and the problem that teachers can generally identify. So that each learner examine the issue and select that data to sequences, links, and construct their plan of action, including performance and criteria. it is discovering the process for identifying and designing a solution to a subject matter problems that has multiple functions and parts. The teacher designs a general question and then shifts to the design of the program to the student. The role of the student in that style is to make decisions about how to investigate the general subject matter. So through this teaching style the student have opportunity to explore a wide range of possibilities and a diverse way of investigation and the design and the programming. So they have total freedom of expressing their own identity and establishing their self-confidence. So additionally, by sharing all student processes and procedures with others, the students are able to learn diverse perspective and the decision-making process, and as well as the background of that discovery and the why. For example, using that previous example of flag tag games, the teacher can apply the learner-designed individual program style I and ask the student to find the barriers that they find in our society and that might affect individual person's ability to play games and the physical activities. That students can bring back their findings from that project and then apply them to the rules and then how they play games. So these are some of the actual examples that applying the diversifying of spectrum teaching style can promote that justice, equity, diversity, inclusion, JEDI, into their physical education daily lessons. So thank you again, everyone, for being here and staying here for extended amount of time. I mean, 30 more extra minutes, and then listening to my presentation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Haneishi, for your very practical presentation. So, do anyone have questions and comments?
I have a comment and a question.
Sure.
Firstly, I enjoyed the presentation. I have to admit, in all the years I've looked at the spectrum, I've never made an overt connection between it and a critical focus. And so it's sort of opened my eyes, and it's obvious once you start mentioning it. One of the things I was thinking of, though, as soon as you started talking about DEI and JEDI and other acronyms, was what Mr. DeSantis would think about that in Florida. And is it wise of us to actually advertise that the spectrum does those things when so many people are trying to stop teachers doing this kind of thing? So maybe using the spectrum, these things happen as a byproduct. If teachers use a range of teaching styles, do you think that we naturally get some kind of inclusion and diversity and a consideration of these issues, or do you have to overtly think about it? So I'm thinking from a sort of protection kind of way, so we don't get, and I could see in Florida them saying, right, that's it, PE teachers, you can only use command and practice style. Anything else is woke, and we won't let you do it, right? You can see that coming. So should we advertise the fact or not? What do you think?
My opinion, number one, this justice, equity, diversity, inclusion has to be intentionally embedded into the lesson. So yes, we do it most of the time, because we apply these styles and then teacher make it things inclusive. But again, it has to be intentional. Intentionality needs to be their plan, And then, I get your point. We are in the United States. Depending on where you are, the addressing the JEDI matters gets to different ways. But I believe that the shape national standard. If you look at the new standard, there is a huge shift into addressing these matters. And then, again, this is very much political matters within the United States. But if you look at around the world, people are studying. There are people here from the Europe that I did hear that there are more emphasis on intentionally addressing these matters within the physical education have been pushed in European country as well. And then there are more increasing interest in the Asian country too. I mean, like I can only speak for, a few countries in Asia, but anyway. So I believe that it is, I totally get where you're coming from, but I like to push this on that because I think it's important, some people might avoid talk about it, but it's very important to teach our students how to talk about these kind of things. So maybe we use a different language in a particular area of countries, but again, like intentionality is very important.
Can I also make a comment if we have time? I don't know.
Yes, of
Can
course.
I thank you
Please.
for this great presentation. It's always very, very good to see the practical focus that you put in your presentation with a strong theoretical background. So, and we need those kind of very practical applications. I was just making a reflection. So about the inclusion, equity, and diversity, I think it is embedded, or it should be explicitly embedded or included in our daily practice, because that generates learning and for different people. So it should be embedded. On the other hand, we have another argument that at least we try to use here in the faculty when we are training our pre-service teachers, our future teachers, and touching base with Curtner-Smith, socialization. So we know that a big constraint is their mindset, their previous mindset. They are pretty much traditional. So for me, it's very clear if we use mainly or predominantly command and practice tasks, we won't develop the spectrum of learning outcomes it should develop, because it doesn't appeal for making decisions, thinking critically, to getting autonomy, to getting to cooperate, to solve problems, to negotiate, to empathize with the others. So this is the same when we focus the curriculum in the direct instruction. So it simply does not apply to the realization of the full spectrum of learning goals, the social, emotional, affective, cognitive. It's pretty much focused on the psychomotor. But so I think this is a strong argument in my point of view. So it kind of, we need to broaden the spectrum of what we do in our lessons, I think. Just a reflection.
Yeah, thank you, Claudia. I just want to add, yes, totally, I totally agree. I think that one thing I want to add is when we think about the student we have at the school settings, current student or even future student, and then see what's going on in our society and then what we need to teach at schools. Those are the things we need to think about it, right? Yes, we need to think about, how to teach, how to teach how to play games and tactics and like skills, but then like more, we need to teach addition to that, right? So again, like we always need to go back to like who we are teaching to at the school and, current generation and future generations, and what they need to be taught, at the school to become effective global citizens, right? So I think that these are the very important concepts. And in Claudia, I totally agree to horizon that, diversify that spectrum of teaching style in that physical education lessons.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Haneishi. Thank you for your wonderful presentation. And thank you for all your participating in this section of the day. And even though this is the last section of our 2023 workshop series initiative, we will continuously invite more experts and scholars to share their knowledge and experiences in the future with your support. So due to our time limitation, so please visit our official website and Facebook page constantly, and you will receive the latest SITL news and initiatives. Thank you for your participation again.